So, Cheryl, you are a familiar face to the Washington Times and Higher Ground. Appreciate you joining me today.
It's so great to be with you, Billy. Thank you so much.
All right, so we are going to talk about the election after because there's a lot to talk about. But the main reason we're here today is you have a new book out, and this book is a fiction book, which is really interesting for a variety of reasons because you're known for your political commentary, for your conservative views, for being really just astute in that area. What made you want to venture out into fiction?
Well, fiction, I do believe, is what I was always supposed to do. When I was a little kid, I used to write fiction all the time through high school. It was fiction, 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 even through college. And then it was after college, it was easier to get a job in journalism. And, for 30 years now, I've been writing nonfiction. And this is sort of coming full circle, coming home to what I believe God wanted me to do in the first place. One of the things he had in store for me on earth here, anyhow.
Well, here you are. You've got the book, Chloe, and this is going to be, I believe, and I don't want to speak for you, but a book series, correct?
It is. It's the first of a 5-part series. Yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to accomplish through this book, a little bit about the characters. Just take us through your mind and your heart, because I know there's a lot of heart behind this book.
There is behind this book and behind the whole series. So, first off, Chloe is about a little girl who was born in horrible conditions. Her family was a wreck, addictions, and so forth. And so it was about her journey through life, the difficulties she faced because of her past and her upbringing, and how God finally reached her through some mysterious conditions. And it is fiction, but there are some things in it that are fact based and so forth. I'll let the reader decide on it. And as for my heart with it, this is a little bit longer story. It'll take me a minute if you don't mind.
Sure,
But
absolutely.
the church that I used to go to, I went out to lunch with a woman whom I was friendly with, and we both wanted to get to know each other a little better. And as we were chatting over things over lunch, our talk turned to people with, issues in life. And she mentioned a woman that she knew who had been a prostitute. And then she just made the offhand comment, I don't know why she would have chose that life. I don't know why she did that. And it struck me as a little bit harsh because I'm a believer in choice. I don't think that your upbringing necessarily means that that's how you're doomed in your life and so forth. But I do think that some people have choices that are thrust upon them because their worldview is different. And if you're raised in a sort of terrible home life, your choice, your way of looking at the world is going to be very different from somebody who's raised with God, with family values, traditional values, and so forth. And so the reason I wanted to write Chloe was to address what I think in the church is a failing to understand those who have really dark pasts or who are walking in what seems to many in the church to be a willful lifestyle of rebellion against God. And I wanted to sort of bring that to the forefront to help people in the church, those who believe, have more compassion reaching out to those who don't.
I love what you just said because I feel like, and I don't want to oversimplify the church, but I do think there are two categories of people in the church generally, okay? And push back on anything you disagree with. But I think the first category is people who grew up in the church, people like me who my parents were Christians, they took me to church, and maybe your faith looks a little different as you get older, it may get stronger, hopefully, but you grew up in the church, at least culturally, you were there. And so you didn't have those big moments of coming out of a lifestyle that was difficult. Then you have that other category of people, and these are people you and I have interviewed or been around or interacted in, even in our churches, ex, porn stars even. I just interviewed an ex-porn star, right, who became a Christian, and that's an extreme example. But people who have left maybe very difficult lifestyles that they found themselves in or chose to be in, depending on their circumstances, and they've now found Jesus. And sometimes those two groups, the first one doesn't necessarily understand what it looks like to be in that secondary group, right?
They don't. And this isn't to be judgmental because it's through no fault of their own, really, right? If you're raised with God and you're raised to see the world through a biblical value, then you don't really have the deeper understanding of what makes people in the dark really tick. And I think, though, the church could do a better job about reaching out to those people in walking in darkness now. These aren't the people who are willingly going to come to church. Those in the church actually have to reach out to them, right? We have to do a better job of making the first step to reach out to these lost souls, because they're not just going to suddenly wake up and decide, you know what I need today? I need to put down this crack pipe and go to church. It's not going to happen. And so I think it starts with us in the church understanding and having compassion without feeling as if we need to turn these people into complete victims, and then being able to reach out to them with a little bit more effectiveness to help bring them to Christ.
No, absolutely. And having that understanding, right? And look, to your point, that first group, I mean, the ideal is that everybody had a chance to grow up, with faith, and that it gets stronger as they grow and that they never have to go through those horrific circumstances in their life. But that's not the reality for a lot of people. And so we have to be able to understand that. When it comes to Chloe and this book series, but in particular, book one, why did you feel it was important to tackle second chances, particularly in light of the culture that we're in, where people are canceled for the smallest of things?
Well, we all need second chances, right? And I believe deeply, very deeply, in the notion of there, but for the grace of God go I. When I walk around DC, or I just came back from the convention in Chicago, where I saw people stretched out on the streets, laying there sleeping, right? Homeless people. I look at people who are going through these dark times, and I think that could just as easily be me. And honestly, it really could just as easily be any of us. It's only through the grace of God that we are not facing that situation right now. So I think just starting with that viewpoint sort of gives you this air of humility first, where you recognize how God has saved you from that fate, but also maybe makes you more open and softer to God's prompting, to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, how to effectively reach out to people like that.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And we often don't think that, that could be us. It's sort of this us versus them. You look at people and you think, "Oh gosh, that's terrible," but you don't make that connection that a lot of people were living the way that we were before they found themselves homeless or struggling or dealing with whatever it is, they're dealing with. When you think about this book, Chloe, and you think about readers, they pick the book up, they read it, they put it down, they're done. What is it that you want them feeling and experiencing?
I want them to feel compassion for those who have difficult lives right now. And we all know somebody who's facing some sort of addiction or some sort of abuse and neglectful situation. We've all seen that firsthand in our own lives. And then I want them to feel maybe a little bit motivated to ask God, what can I do to help? What can I personally do to help somebody in my circle overcome and come to Christ, come to church? And that would really be the ideal.
You're going to be promoting this book, right? And in this book, obviously, release date August 28th. You're heading into the fall, and the fall is going to be one of the most contentious, difficult, vicious election cycles we have ever seen in this country's history. And you're going to be out there talking about second chances, the difficulties, very real issues that people go through. Not that the election isn't dealing with real issues, but you're going to be doing this in the midst of a very tough circumstance. What do you how are you going to navigate that, and what do you make of that as you're going to be traveling around talking about Chloe, and yet at the same time covering the nonsense and insanity surrounding us?
Well, it's really compatible with what I write about and do at the Washington Times. Everything from a Christian conservative perspective, right? Because here's the link. In this country, we were founded on an ideal of God-given individual liberties and rights, right? And so that is the core, the foundation of American exceptionalism. But to keep that concept in play and to keep government in its proper role of subservience to the people, we need to have God at the forefront of all we do. whether we're talking politics or culture. And so as we turn more and more secular in this nation, which you've seen the polls, you've done the stories on it too, Billy, you know we're turning down this path of secularism and atheism in this nation. The farther down that path we tread, the more God is removed from society, and the more that opens the door for big government to step in, and socialism and collectivism, which is where we are now. So, in order to keep government limited in its scope, we need godly, virtuous people, and that comes from the church. And in order to grow the church, we need to reach those people who are struggling to even get their foot in the door of the church because they don't see the need for God.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the solution. Oftentimes we make politics the solution. Politics is often a symptom of the greater problems. It
Yeah.
is, an arm that can help hold back the crazy, it can help fix some of the issues we have, but it is not the solution. It's sort of the sinus Tylenol to the sinus infection, right? It takes away some of the pain, but it doesn't get rid of the infection. The infection needs to be treated with the gospel, with the truth. And so that needs to often be our focus. Not that the other pieces don't matter that we talk about and cover, but that is the core of it. When I look at your work and I look at what you get to do, you just, as you mentioned, you were at the Democratic National Convention. What was the most disturbing thing, hard topic shift, but I need to ask you this, that you saw, or the most bothersome thing to you as a believer that you saw and experienced during that convention?
Well, in your face was the traveling abortion vasectomy vehicle, right? That's just despicable. But longer term and more subtle was the narrative that the Democrats put forth about freedom and joy, and the U.S. flag waving that went on. And the reason that disturbs me is that I've noticed under the coronavirus how the Democrats have cleverly redefined words that are very American in tone. They redefined patriot under COVID to make it seem the patriotic thing to do was to obey the government and take the shot and wear the face mask. And here they are now doing the same thing with the definition of freedom. When they say freedom, when they say joy, what they're talking about really is slavery with government in charge. And if you read behind the words, their definition, and see their actions, you can see that that's absolutely true. They take a word, they corrupt it, they redefine it into something opposite. So that was the bigger danger to me, the bigger concern I saw coming out of the convention.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride. Have you seen, and you've been covering politics a long time, have you seen a situation where a major party candidate from either party has gone this long after becoming the official candidate of that party or the presumed candidate of that party without doing media interviews, without doing unscripted activities? I mean, as we're recording this right now, it's over a month since Kamala Harris has been in the position that she's in. Have you ever seen that before in the past?
No, because even Joe Biden, as hesitant as he was to get out on the trail, he did media interviews from his basement, right? Remember, we go back in time, the start of COVID and so forth. And so even he felt the need to step in front of the cameras and give interviews. And Kamala Harris, the Democrat Party is purposely, strategically sheltering her, keeping her quiet, because they know that when it comes to pointing to successes, she doesn't have any to point to. She is the sitting vice president, and it is all too easy for the other side, for the conservatives, to say, "Well, why don't you fix this now?" And anything that she might point to as critical and needful of change.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting about this is that it doesn't feel as though the media, you would think there'd be more of a clamor for her to speak. There's a lot of coverage around her, but outside of the conservative press, there aren't a lot of people saying, "Hey, where are you? Why aren't you speaking? Why haven't we seen interviews? Why is none of this unscripted? Why is it all so scripted?" And it seems like even among Democrats, and maybe I'm just missing it, you're not hearing a lot of people. You're hearing some put that pressure on. Why do you think there's such silence in that regard?
Yeah, you're hearing whisperings. That's about it, right? There are a few in the left leaning or mainstream press who have raised that point, but they seem to raise it, and then they seem willing to just wait and see, and even talk about how, well, as the weeks go by, I'm sure Vice President Harris will hold some press events, and so they seem willing to fall in on her side in favor. And I think really the reason why we're seeing this go forth is that the media has for years now, since at least Barack Obama days, been really tightly joined at the hip with the Democrat Party. They seem to work together, not just in terms of pushing Democrats forward and winning elections for them, but also denouncing conservatives, particularly Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, looking at this, okay, so before we go, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction, which is so dangerous to do, but I'm going to ask you, obviously right now, if you were to look at things, it appears as though Kamala Harris is ahead and she may get a bump from the convention. There's not many polls out so far since. What do you think happens in November? If you had to put a wager on it, do you think it's Trump or Harris?
Well, given that the election is fair and its integrity guides the process, I'm gonna vote for Donald Trump. I'm going to vote that Donald Trump wins, because if you look at his rallies, if you look at his campaign speeches and the attendance, and if then you look at the core issues that are really important to American voters, the economy, number one, and crime, which goes hand in hand with border security, that's Donald Trump all the way. And we've got polls that show that he beats Kamala Harris by several percentage points on those issues. So, yeah, I think we're seeing the cheering and the fanfare about Kamala right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean these people are going to vote for her.
Yeah, and I think what people are forgetting too is over the last two election cycles, the opposing candidate, whether it was Clinton or Biden, they were further ahead than she is now. And so with all this clamoring and excitement, even if she goes 5-6 points ahead, she's still actually behind in the popular vote, polling wise, where Clinton and Biden were at this point in the campaign. And that should actually be troubling to some of the pollsters on the Democratic side, in my view, when you look at that trajectory and where things could go. So I appreciate you allowing me to drag you into politics a little bit, but the book is Chloe. Now, for those out there, we want people watching and listening to go and grab the book. Where is the best place for them to go and do that?
You can get it directly from the publisher at Fidelis, or of course, you can go to Amazon and all the other places books are sold. Thanks for that, Billy.
No problem. Cheryl, as always, appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.